Angular 2 is almost 100% different from Angular 1, but the concepts that you've learned throughout this course will be helpful if you want to make the move to Angular 2. In this lecture, we'll look at how to install Angular 2 and how to get ourselves set up to convert part of our application over to it. Alright, so we should start off by pointing out that the Angular 2 website is here at angular.io. So there's some great resources here on this site, and one of them is this Getting Started guide. So you can do a 5-minute quick start, and you can choose which language you want to use. You can say Angular 2 for TypeScript, or for JavaScript, or if you want, if you're feeling adventurous, you can choose to use the Dart language, which is made by Google. So feel free, if you like, to go through this quick start before we even get going, and it'll give you a pretty good sense of how an Angular 2 application works. But we'll cover pretty much all of what's here ourselves in this module. Now, if you remember when we were doing Angular 1 and we had to download the scripts that were involved with Angular 1, we used npm. We did npm install Angular. And we're still going to use npm to get Angular 2, but we're going to take things a little bit differently this time. What we'll actually do is use a quick start project. And this has the benefit of having things kind of all sorted for us already. And as we'll see, because we'll be using TypeScript, things are a bit different now. We have to use what's called a build step. We'll get more into that in a second, but for now, just know that the easiest way to get started is with something that is pre-assembled. And so a really good package to use is called ng2play. So what we can do is Google for ng2play. And ng2play is a quick start package that lets us get going with Angular 2 really quickly. And this is good for us so that we don't kind of get lost in any details off the bat. So you may or may not be new to GitHub, and if you are, probably the easiest way for you, without having to install anything, is to download the zip folder for this. So you can download a zip folder and unzip it and place it on your desktop, but the way that I'll show you to download this is through the command line. So if you come over here, you can copy the path to this repository, and then you can come over here to the command line, and I'm on the desktop, so just head over to your desktop, and we'll do git clone, and then we'll paste in that path, and then let's give it a different name. If we just clone it as is, it's going to put it in a folder called ng2play, and that's fine, but maybe we'll just call it ng2 classifieds. So once it's complete, you'll get a message that it's all done, and now we can take a look at it. So let's just list our files. There we see we've got ng2 classifieds, so let's check it out. We'll cd ng2 classifieds. And let's take a look inside there. Now let's open it up in Sublime, which you can of course do manually, or if you've got the Sublime command, you can open it up just like this. Alright, so here is our project. Now let's start by exploring around a little bit. The first place we'll start is here in this index.html file. So what you'll see is we've got some HTML that looks pretty similar to what we're used to, and then here within the body tag, we've got this element called hello app. And because we just covered directives, you might be expecting this to be a directive. As we'll see in a second, what it actually is a selector that we choose within our component to have our application render in. Now we've got a few more things here. We've got a file that helps us do polyfilling. So there's a lot of features of modern JavaScript that aren't available in all browsers just yet. So we have some polyfills for that. We've got a shim for ES6. So ES6 or ES 2015, which is the next generation of JavaScript. And then finally here we've got something called System.js. And System.js is what's known as a module loader. And so it gives us a standard way of loading up our JavaScript in the browser. And to kind of make a long story short here, there's kind of a lot of different ways that we can bring in JavaScript files, and System.js helps us to standardize that. So no matter what the package is, we can provide a way for System.js to help us load it in the browser properly. Here's our configuration for our System.js. And then we've also got a couple other libraries like RxJS, which lets us work with observables, which are a way to handle asynchronous JavaScript, kind of like promises, but they go a lot further than that. And then finally down here, we've got our actual Angular 2.js script. Now what I'm going to do is actually remove the minified version, and we're just going to use the unminified version for this module. And the reason is that there is a little bug that happens in the minified version, at least at beta 2, so this will help us get around that. And by the time you get to this module, it might not be an issue anymore. But just in case it is, it might be worth just getting rid of that .min anyway. And then finally, we've got something down here that says system import, and then it looks to a folder called dist, which will show up over here afterwards. We'll see that in just a second. And it's looking in there for something called hello. And hello is a script. It is a script that will be output after everything is ready to go. And that will be what is used to bootstrap the application. All right, so let's save that, and let's come over here and check out our source folder. And inside source, we've got hello.ts, and TS, of course, stands for TypeScript. So this here is what an Angular 2 component looks like. Now, in next generation JavaScript, in ES6, and in TypeScript, because TypeScript is really just ES6 with type annotations, we're able to import different classes and different pieces of code this way through an import statement. So here we are importing component from Angular 2 core. And component is what's called a decorator. So we set up our component decorator here. And what this does is it attaches metadata to our class. In ES6 and TypeScript, we use classes, and we use classes to wire up our components. And to describe those classes and how they should work, we use the component decorator like this. So let's run through it. We've got selector, which points to hello app. And just like we saw over here, hello app is the element that we'll be rendering our application in. And then after that, we've got a template. And right in line here, we've described a template to use. Now, what you'll notice here is that we're not using standard single quotes around our template, but rather we're using backticks. And that's an ES6 feature that allows us to have multi-line strings. So if we weren't to use these backticks, every time we wanted to have a new line, we'd have to do something like this. We'd have to put a quote around our line, and then we'd have to do a plus at the end. We'd do plus, and then we'd go to the next line and we'd put our next element, say, and then we'd have to do a plus at the end of that line if we wanted to go on further. But the great thing about backticks here at Angular 2 and in ES6 in general is that we don't need to do those pluses anymore. We can just have a multi-line string and not worry about it. And then down here within our class, you'll see that we have a name property, and this is where typing comes in. This is where TypeScript types come in. We're saying that our name should be a string, so we're describing the type of this property. And then finally, we bootstrap the application at the bottom. We bring in Bootstrap from Angular 2 platform browser, and then we pass our root component in to be bootstrapped. And so this is an important thing in Angular 2. We always have one root component or parent component that has children. We create other components for use in our application, but we always have one single root component. And that root component is what gets bootstrapped. And in this case, we're bootstrapping the hello app component. All right, so what about this dist folder here? Well, that is a place that's going to hold some JavaScript for us. So even though we're writing our application in TypeScript, the browser doesn't actually have a way of interpreting TypeScript. It doesn't know how to read it. So if we want to use TypeScript, we have to give the browser a way that it can understand it. So what we have to do then is transpile our TypeScript into JavaScript. And this dist folder that we'll see in a second is the place where our JavaScript files end up, at least in the way that things are set up here. And we can see that configuration here through this gulp file. So you may or may not be familiar with gulp. If you're not, it serves as a task runner for JavaScript. And so you see here we've defined some tasks like clean and TypeScript to JS. And this is the one here that's actually going to convert our TypeScript over to JavaScript. And essentially what it does is it looks for any TypeScript files and then it pipes them into the dist folder. And then finally, we've also got a task here set up called play, which serves the application and lets us see it in the browser on port 9000. So we no longer have to use HTTP server that we were using before. All right, so now that we've had a tour of the package, why don't we install the dependencies and get a look at it in the browser? So let's head back over to the command line and we'll want to do npm install. And there you see we've got quite a few packages that I've installed, and we can take a look at those here in our node modules folder. So we've got all of these packages that come with a pretty standard installation of Angular 2. All right, so we still don't have our dist folder, but that's going to show up as soon as we run play on this. Before we can do that though, we need to make sure that we have gulp installed. So again, you might already have this, but in case you don't, let's install it here. So what we do is install it globally, and so we can say npm install with the G flag for globally gulp. And so now we can do gulp play. And that will run the conversion from TypeScript into JavaScript for us, and then it opens up the app in a browser tab. And you can see here we've got our hello world message, and this input is bound to the text element up there, so we can do our name here if we like. And that is a quick look at how we start an Angular 2 application from an already made quick start package. In the next video, we'll start converting our ng classifieds application over.